Well, welcome back. My name is Chris. I'm the lead pastor here at Hoboken Grace. And right now we are in this conversation called Making Love. And for the past couple of weeks, we've been looking at, okay, how do we thrive in relationships? And week one, we made a commitment. No more wall jumping. Now, if you weren't with us in week one, I highly encourage you to go back and listen to it, because what I just said makes no sense to you. And it's crucial to what we're walking through, because Jesus has promised to lead us into life, not just life, but life to the full, if we'll trust him and do it his way instead of trying to do it our way and try to steal what he created through our own means and methods. And we decided, okay, we're not doing that anymore. And so we've been looking at, okay, how does he teach us to love? Last week we saw this incredible truth that the most valuable thing that we have to offer is love. And we work on so many different things in our life, so many things that we have to offer, but God says, no, the most valuable thing that you have to offer is love. Next week, we're going to be looking at how do you develop that in your life. But this week, I want to talk about something that's crucial to the dream of what we want to see happen in relationships, because we don't want to just start relationships. Last week we talked about initiating. We don't want to just start relationships. We want relationships that last. We want relationships that can stand the test of time. How do we do that? And the reality is, and hopefully you understand this, that there's a lot that goes into lasting when it comes to making love. We understand that. We can't go through all of that today, but what I do want to do today is talk about one thing that I think the scriptures say is incredibly important, maybe one of the most important aspects of lasting in a relationship. Now, to do that, what I want to do is I want to take you to one of my favorite passages about marriage in all of the scriptures. And some of you, you've never heard this passage before, because it's amazing. People don't talk about it nearly as much as they should. It's an unbelievable dream that God has for what marriage can be. The passage is actually found in the book of Proverbs, and it's in the context of a father who's speaking to his son. Now, it's a father speaking to his son, so it's from the perspective of a husband, but make no mistake about it, this principle applies, this dream that God has for us. Listen what it says. It says, "May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth." He's talking to his son about him and his wife. "A loving doe, a graceful deer, may her breast satisfy you always. May you ever be captivated by her love." I love this passage. As a matter of fact, I share this with every class that we walk through premarital with, because this is and I tell them this is my dream for you. What an unbelievable dream that you would be in a relationship, not just that lasts, but a relationship where you're satisfied with the one you're with. Tell me that's not incredible. And I know as we get started here that for some of you, you've bought into the hype of new. And I'll have conversations with people and they'll say to me, I don't know if I could ever just be with one person for the rest of my life because you want that new. Well, I just want to let you know this as we get started here today. I want to let you know, if you go down that path, what he's talking about here, satisfaction, that new never satisfies. As a matter of fact, if you go down the path of new, well, you always need new. There's no end to that chase. And the longer you go down that path, the less likely it is that you'll ever be able to experience the dream that he's talking about here. And once again, Jesus steps into our life and he says, I have something better for you. God steps in and says, I have something better for you. I have this unbelievable dream for you. And even as we come together today, this is my dream, that as you step into a relationship, that it would be a relationship like this. That for those of you that God calls to take the step of marriage, that there would be a marriage like this. And he says, this is my dream. This is my dream. But interestingly enough, he doesn't share this dream in a passage that's celebrating marriage. This isn't a passage that's talking about all of the great things in marriage. That's not where he shares this. As this father is writing to his son, he actually shares the dream in the midst of a warning. He's actually warning him of something and drawing his attention to something that could possibly, that will potentially, actually, that will almost definitely destroy the dream if he's not paying attention to it. Listen to the warning. My son, pay attention to my wisdom. He's saying, come here. You guys have heard me say that a lot. He's saying, pay attention to my wisdom. Listen well to my words of insight, that you may maintain discretion and your lips may preserve knowledge. And then he starts to give the warning. He says, listen carefully. Here's the warning. For the lips of an adulteress drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. Now, this is a father sharing it with his son, so it's from that perspective, but it applies in every direction. This isn't just about a woman. It also applies the other direction. He's talking about unfaithfulness. He says, for the lips of an adulteress drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. But in the end, she is bitter as gall, sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. She gives no thought to the way of life. Her paths are crooked, but she knows it not. Now then, my sons, listen to me. Do not turn aside from what I say. Keep to a path far from her. Do not go near the door of her house, lest you give your best strength to others. And he's been given this warning. He says, I want you to understand where that path leads. Listen to what he says. He says, lest you give your best strength to others and your years to one who is cruel, lest strangers feast on your wealth and your toil enrich another man's house. At the end of your life, you will groan. When your flesh and body are spent, you will say, how I hated discipline, how my heart spurned correction. He said, if you go down this path, I'm telling you, you're going to look back on this day and you're going to say, I wish I had listened. I would not obey my teachers or listen to my instructors. I have come to the brink of utter ruin in the midst of the whole assembly. And then he goes back and he says, don't go down this path. And then he switches it a little bit and he starts to give the positive advice. He says, drink water from your own cistern. He's talking about a relationship here. Running water from your own well. Should your springs overflow in the streets, your streams of water in the public squares? Let them be yours alone, never to be shared with strangers. And that's when he begins the dream. May your fountain be blessed. May you rejoice in the wife of your youth, a loving doe, a graceful deer. May her breast satisfy you always. May you ever be captivated by her love. Why be captivated, my son, by an adulteress? Why embrace the bosom of another man's wife? This dream that we find is in the midst of a warning. And as he's sharing with us this warning, as God's stepping into our lives and sharing with us this warning, he calls us to one of the most fundamental aspects of a lasting relationship. It's something else that each of us has the opportunity to be able to give. Last week we talked about the most significant, the most valuable thing that we have to offer, and this is tied into that. It's tied into love. But I think it's important that we understand the significance specifically of this, because he's talking about exclusivity. He's talking about faithfulness. And he's saying, if you want to experience this dream, you have to take serious exclusivity. You have to take serious faithfulness. Listen to how he says it as he's walking him through this. Let them be yours alone, never to be shared with strangers. He says, one of the great gifts that you have to give is that you get to give to someone else what you give to no one else. You get to give to someone what you give to no one else. This is for you. something that I've never given to anyone else. This is for you. He says the foundation of this dream that I'm sharing with you is faithfulness. And we often think about this in terms of physical things, but this is true in all sorts of different ways in relationship. The way that you smile at them and you don't smile at anyone else that way. The way that you speak to them, you don't speak to anyone else that way. This is emotional, physical, spiritual. There's so many different aspects to this. And he says you have to understand the fundamental nature of faithfulness and how it impacts this dream. Now, I know that for many of you, you say, well, I mean, of course, Chris, you shouldn't cheat on your spouse. I understand that. I'm not going to commit adultery. But here's the problem with that. For a long time, and God's been working on me about this a lot recently. Some of you have heard me talk about it in several different settings. But I think we have a huge problem when it comes to how we understand faithfulness. And God's been challenging me about this because typically we think about faithfulness as what we do. That faithfulness applies to what we do. And so we're concerned with the specific decisions that we make. And even as we talk about faithfulness now, you're thinking about, okay, this actual act of adultery and that action. It's what we do. But God's been challenging me. That faithfulness is about more than just what we do. It's actually about what we dream. That faithfulness is not just about what we do, it's actually about what we dream. In other words, what it is that we give our heart to. That faithfulness is about just as much what's happening in here as it is what's happening out here. What it is that we're passionate about, what it is that we long for, what it is that consumes our thoughts. This is why I think when Jesus comes along, why he says what he says as he's speaking about adultery. Listen to what it says, Matthew chapter 5, verse 27. Jesus says this, "You have heard that it was said, 'Do not commit adultery,' but I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." What in the world are you talking about, Jesus? Jesus is saying, you guys have such a very low standard of faithfulness. Because you think it's just about what you do. But it's actually about what you dream. And he calls us to a different understanding of what faithfulness actually is. He actually calls us to this in our relationship with him. Our meditation passage for this past month has had to do with this very same thing. And God actually accuses us of adultery in our relationship with him. What is he talking about? Listen to the passage, you adulterous people. He's talking about us. Don't you know that friendship with the world is hatred towards God? Anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. Or do you think Scripture says without reason that the Spirit he caused to live in us envies intensely? He steps in, he says, no, you've been unfaithful. And It's not just about what we do, it's about what we love. And he says, you love the things of this world more than you love me. And your dreams, your thoughts, your passions, they're all about the things of this world. They're not about me. And he says, you've been unfaithful. God's been challenging me in so many different ways as I've been working through his word to change the way that I think about faithfulness. And it has a huge impact on the way that you look at this warning in Proverbs. It's an incredible dream. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. A loving doe, a graceful deer. May her breast satisfy you always. It's an incredible dream. But God step into our lives and say, if you want to know, if you want to know a relationship that doesn't just last, but also satisfies, where you're satisfied with the one that you're with, you have to take seriously faithfulness. It's an unbelievable dream, but if we're going to live this out, we have to guard our hearts. Because, well, to be honest with you, it's become easier than ever to be unfaithful. And again, remember, we're not just talking about what we do, we're talking about what we dream. And you look at that passage in Proverbs, and he's saying, don't go near her home, because there was a time when you actually had to go to that. But it's amazing, isn't it, that you don't have to go to her anymore. She'll come to you. You don't have to go to him anymore. He'll come to you. And it's easier than ever to maintain that relationship with that person that you know you shouldn't be in contact with anymore. And it's easier than ever to see the breasts of another. It's easier than ever to allow ourselves to begin dreaming of someone else, of something else. And God's saying, listen, I have an unbelievable dream for you. But every time you go down that road, every time you decide to allow yourself, to allow your passion, to allow your love to be directed towards another, your attraction, you chip away at that dream. And God in Proverbs says, you need to understand the end of that path. Let me take you back to what he says is the end of that path. He says, if you go down that road, he says, lest you give your best strength to others and your years to one who is cruel, lest strangers feast on your wealth and your toil enrich another man's house. At the end of your life, you will groan when your flesh and body are spent. You will say, how I hated discipline, how I spurned correction. Listen, if you have ever watched someone walk through a divorce, you know what he's talking about here. And the pain and the brokenness and all of what goes into a relationship where they weren't satisfied with one another. And God says, I don't want for you to know that. I want something better for you. I want for you to know this dream. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. But some of us were trying to steal what God created for relationships to be, and we're trying to do it our way. And so you maintain that flirtatious relationship with that person at the office. Do you want the joy that relationships are meant to be? And so you just keep that around. You want the joy that relationships are meant to be. And so you just keep watching that show. I mean, there's not that much nudity in the show. And you allow your attraction to be diverted to another. You want the joy that relationships are meant to be, and so you keep that relationship on Facebook. Or maybe you just check their photos every now and then, and you allow yourself to dream of someone else. And we look at it and we say, well, I'm not doing. Faithfulness is bigger than that. It's bigger than that. And God steps into our lives and says, okay, as our Father, I love how this passage is as a father, he's speaking to us. As our Father, he steps in and says, I have something better for you. Remember week 1, I told you, when we follow Jesus in relationship, we have this unbelievable advantage. This is one of those places where he said, I have something better for you. This is one of those places where you see the words of Jesus lived out when Jesus says to his followers, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. That word rest, that's the same thing he's talking about with satisfaction. It's like, I want for you to know that rest, to be satisfied with the relationship that you have and the one that you have. I want you to experience this. I have this unbelievable dream for you. So get rid of the unfaithfulness. Because it'll destroy it. Not just what's happening out here, what's happening in here. It's time to put an end. It's time to put an end to the unfaithfulness so that we can follow Jesus, so that we can follow Jesus into the dream of what he has for us. Will you pray with me? Father, I'm incredibly grateful for the fact that you've promised to lead us into not just life, but life to the full. And Father, I thank you for this warning today. I think for far too long we've looked at this as just what we do. But I pray that today we would look closely at, okay, where am I allowing my passions to be directed? In our relationship with you, where are we allowing our passions to be directed? In our relationship with you, what is it that we're dreaming of? Is it things of this world, or is it things of your kingdom and what you want to see happen in the world around us? In the relationships that we have? Are we flirting with unfaithfulness? Are we allowing ourselves to be attracted to something else? Are we allowing ourselves to dream of someone else or something else? Father, I pray for every person watching. I pray that they would see the beauty of your dream. And I pray that today they would decide, that they would commit. No. I'm going to be faithful not just in what I do. I'm going to be faithful in what I dream. And as a result, that we would love better. We would demonstrate you better. And as a result, we would know that dream that you have for us. In Jesus' name, amen.